to a special edition for the Third Degree Byrne crowd. This is going to be a review of a non-John Byrne issue or two. Yes, we're absolutely taking control. The interns have rioted, and we are taking control of this episode, at least, for a fill-in. We're going to talk about something that appealed to us, that we thought that we'd be interested in sharing with you, and we'll see if it appeals to you as well. I'm Kirk Greenfield, one of the interns, and I'm joined by John Hyatt. Say hi, John.
Hey, another intern.
And we're just here on a Sunday morning, just wanted to chat and review something. In fact, what we're going to be talking about is a two-part story in The Invaders from, what is this, 1977 or so?
1978.
78, okay. And this was a time period, I should give you a little background here. I was not buying or reading comics while I was in college, which was the late 70s. So I saw this showing up on the newsstand, and other than glancing at it, I didn't give the Invaders series any attention. I wasn't buying comics at all. I was concentrating on my education. It wasn't until I got out of college that I came back into it, because the Days of Future Past storyline was showing up on the newsstand, and I had time and disposable cash on my hands, so I dipped my toe back into comics and then got sucked in. So I almost totally missed the Byrne run of the X-Men. But my point is, as an older fan, I remember the first appearances of the Invaders as guest stars in Avengers 70 or 71. Written by Roy Thomas, and that was eventually reincorporated into one of the Invaders annuals, I guess, showing the story from the other point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was aware of the Invaders and the All-Winter Squad because they were being reprinted in kind of a scattershot method in a reprint title called Fantasy Masterpiece back in the 60s. So I was vaguely aware of them. I may have read a Human Torch story or a Toro story or something like that. And occasionally there would be some reference to that golden age in a Silver Age story. So I was peripherally aware that there had been a team that was fighting propaganda stories in the World War II, but I didn't pursue it. I wasn't aware that they were going to get their own title. But if anybody's the right person for writing it, Roy Thomas has to be the one, because he's a history major, he's a literature major, and he has the interest and the passion, and he kind of developed them as an ongoing interest, as far as I know. And then they guest starred in Namor numbers 9, 10, 11, or 10, 11, 12, something like that, a 3-part. Although they didn't really guest star, we've covered that in Third Degree Byrne story, which, John, you introduced. And so rather than put words in your mouth to describe your interest in that, I'm going to hand it off to you so you can explain why you are so drawn to these characters.
So I was a kid at the time. I was Invaders started in 1975. It ran for 41 issues. It had a giant-sized edition, which introduced the series, and then the annual, which kind of revisited the Avengers story that you talked about earlier. And I just, I'm not a World War II buff, but I've always enjoyed those stories. My father, grew up during that period. The war was very real. So when the Invaders came out, it was an interesting aspect of comic book storytelling. And you're right, Roy Thomas is the best person for this. Because he loves history and he loves comic book history. And then when he moved over to DC, he, of course, did the All-Star Squadron, revisited them, and kind of did a very similar thing where he took existing Golden Age characters and told stories in the time period with existing characters and new characters. So it was really cool. I love the All-Star Squadron as well. So this was just a really interesting series for me. I love this. I love the characters. It was great to see the original Human Torch, the Captain America, and Submariner, not as a wacko crazy. I can't say wacko crazy, but he was determined to protect his kingdom, and sometimes he was a little little on the aggressive side or a lot on the aggressive side, but it was great to
Sure.
see him fighting against Nazis and being a part of the dynamic of the team. I don't recall if I had a subscription to this or if I was just lucky enough to get it on the spinner racks all the time, but I was pretty able to get them. And if not, there was a little an old used bookstore that would get stacks of comics all the time, and they would set them on these shelves, and I would go through and flip through them, and I think probably pay a dime a piece for them back then.
Wow.
And I'd come home with stacks of them and just put them in my own stacks and just collect them and read them and enjoy them.
It's so different now with the internet and many of the comic book shops going under. The availability of issues. If you wanted to see this, you could call it up online. There was no such thing when we were kids. The only way you could get a back issue was one of those used book shops, or the grocer who had a pile of used comics that he would buy from people for pennies an issue and then sell for 10 cents a piece. Those were the only, or trade with your friends or your relatives. Mm-hmm. When you would see them or stumble on one, or maybe a yard sale in your small town. That was it.
That was
it. There was no great supply chain, although the ads were in the comic books. Some people were selling them, but the idea of buying a comic for $1 a piece, it was like, that was outrageous. That was like the entire month's allowance. You couldn't afford to do that. So it was a different era, and the approach to comics and the value of comics was different. To his dying day, my father always referred to comic books as funny books.
My dad
had a very specific definition that they were reprints from the Sunday funnies, the color Sunday funnies, from the Sunday edition of the newspaper that were bound, and they were very disposable. So, he could not understand the appeal of them. He did not understand that there were continued stories or character development. It was just all disposable stuff from his youth. So he never valued them or understood them.
My dad was the same way, Kirk. He was born in 28. So for him, this was such a luxury thing that he had no idea that why I would keep reading comic books into my teens. Those were things that he read when he was 8, if he was lucky enough to have a few pennies to buy them, but he just didn't understand it, my dad. But he let me do it. I really appreciate that he let me enjoy this creativity.
That's great. You mentioned that your family had connections to the World War II era. My father was born in 23, so he's about 1923. So he's about 5 years older than your father was, and as a result, he got into World War II and did not serve overseas, but it very much, it was their era, and the war effort and the newsreels and the promotional posters and that sort of thing was very real for that generation. Funny side connection, we bought this house from a French couple who were in their 70s, I believe, or just turning into their 70s, and they wanted to go home to the old country. It was clear it was the waning years of their life, and so they were going to leave. They spoke French fluently, and our local college here in this town would send French students of the language to them so that they could speak fluently and interact with somebody who it wasn't second nature for them to be able to speak fluently. I don't know how else to say it, smoothly. So when we bought this house, somebody knocked on the door and they asked for the French speaker, and I had to tell them, I'm sorry, they've sold the house, they're no longer here. You'll have to go back to the college and tell them. I stumbled on somebody else who, just as they left, sat down and recorded an oral history for them as a personal favor. So they spoke in a cassette recorder in French and described their life in occupied France during World War II, when they had to billet a Nazi soldier in their house, and they had, weapons were forbidden. But the point of this story is he would tell how they had a gun that was hidden inside the tin of cocoa, that was on the back shelf, in the pantry shelf of their kitchen. And the family knew that the gun was there, but the Nazi did not. And if it had been discovered, it would have been the end.
They would all been shot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why they had one, I can't imagine living in that environment myself. But, that was the family's security, and that was the last measure. Not that they would have shot the soldier that was living with them, because they came to an understanding with him in some manner, that they had peace in the house. But no French farmers or no Frenchmen were to have weapons. Period. Well, they had one, and their father knew where it was, and their mother knew where it was, and they never let the kids make their own cocoa or whatever the product was. Anyways, that's a side story that I had to share. It really opened my eyes. I wish I could have gotten a hold of that cassette tape, but I heard the story and thought, oh man, I want to talk to that guy. So
it would have been really interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's shall we give a little background about the Invader series itself, so people who aren't familiar with it can know, just basically, and then we'll move into the 2 issues we chose.
Yep.
All right. So, as Kirk said, the Invaders first appeared in Avengers 71, 1969. So this was the first time they actually called the Invaders, according to the history. So they did kind of do some get-togethers in the world, and the original in the Golden Age in the 40s, but they were called the All-Winter Squad then. When Roy Thomas brought them in for the Avengers story, when the Avengers went back in time and met them, it was kind of interesting. I was looking at it. I haven't read Avengers 71 for ages, but when they paired up, which 3 modern Avengers got to fight which 3 back then, they pitted the Vision against the Human Torch.
Yes.
So a couple of, maybe 2 years later in our timeline, so that's when we found out that the Vision's body was actually the Human Torch's, the original Human Torch's body that Ultron had reconstructed and used for the Vision. So I thought that was kind of cool to see that the Vision was actually fighting himself.
Roy Thomas had that in mind from way back at that point. He had a long game, a long story arc in mind. And when he left the Avengers series, it was probably 3 or 4 years down the road. But when he left, he said to the next writer, hey, do you want to know where this is going? And the guy said, sure, tell me. So he said, here's the big secret. It's the Human Torch. We've never found what happened to him. Well, he's right in front of them, and blah, blah, blah. So they took it and ran with that, planted the seed. And so if you look back at all the clues, which as a kid I was buying every issue of the Avengers, I couldn't connect them. I didn't even realize that there was a mystery brewing here. But in hindsight, the significance of the Vision appearing in 57, joining the Avengers in 58, and then by issue 71, fighting against his old self. I think there's actually a line in there where they say, this doesn't feel right. I feel like we should be joining sides rather than fighting each other. Or I'm an artificial construct as you are too, or something. But there's almost a throwaway line that in hindsight shows Thomas already knew, he already had it planned, that this was going to pay off down the road, that there was this big secret. And thinking back on it now, it's so obvious. We had a destiny for Cap. We knew what happened to Namor. There was an explanation. The Human Torch showed up in an FF annual only because they were trying to screw over Carl Borges and keep the copyright. That's the only reason why that annual happened. And so we thought that was the end of the Human Torch story. For all intents and purposes, it was. But they never answer the question, where's the Human Torch been in all these years? And it wasn't a burning question, but it just seemed so obvious that they had 2 out of the 3 accounted for. Somebody should have tumbled to this. As a kid, I should have tumbled to this saying, that's a dangling plot thread. Anyways, I've taken you off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's really interesting stuff. for me as a kid, the whole thing that the Vision was really the original Human Torch was such a cool, interesting twist on the Vision's character. I was disappointed when it got undone later.
I remember seeing it show up on the spinner racks just before I got out of college and going, the secret origin of the Vision, and flipping through it. This is about 135 or so, and looking and going, what? And putting the issue back on the spinner rack and saying, boy, I'm glad I'm out of comics. And about 6 months later or so, I'm sucked back in. So I just couldn't believe it. It was like I was shaking my head going, man, are they desperate for ideas? It wasn't until later that I saw all the clues laid out, the fear of drowning, the fear of enclosed spaces, the things that would bug or make the Vision go, what's the word I want, not crazy or not bug nuts crazy, but the things that would unnerve him.
Yeah.
It was there, including the Ant-Man's journey into the body of the Vision to repair it. There's a couple of throwaway lines there saying, these look like World War II part. And a couple, there's clearly been clues laid that there's something there, but they were just dangling plot threads. I never connected them at all as a kid. They were too far apart.
The journey through the Vision's body by Ant-Man, I think that was drawn by Neil Adams, right? Just glorious. Yes. That's a beautiful story.
It is. It was the first double-sized one. It was, for all intents and purposes, the kickoff of the Kree-Skrull War. It was phenomenal. I remember that vividly.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. So the Invaders started as the original team up was Captain America, Human Torch, and Submariner back in Avengers 71. Then when they got their own book, they added Toro and Bucky to the team. And fortunately, we don't have a sidekick for Submariner because he might have been, if he had been created back then, he might have had some goofy name like Tadpole or something. So thank goodness they didn't have one for him.
Namorita wasn't part of it back then?
In the 40s? No.
Okay.
I think Namorita didn't come in until later. I think she's more of a Bronze Age creation.
Okay.
But yeah, so there was no Submariner sidekick then. And, the first few issues started off typical, I think, in the U.S., and then they ended up in England in the very early part of the series. So maybe issue 5 or 6, they ended up over there, and then they met Lord Falsworth, his daughter Jacqueline, and his son Brian, and they kind of made friends with them, hung out with them. Jacqueline was she did a very similar job that the Queen did when she was the princess, which was drive ambulances and take care of wounded people. It was soon revealed that Lord Falsworth was the World War I superhero known as Union Jack. That was a really great story. And that there was a World War I team that had a bunch of characters along with it that were, I didn't write them down for this, sorry, but that was kind of interesting. Over the course of the series, Lord Falsworth was injured, and his son Brian took up the mantle of the Union Jack. Jacqueline gained speed powers from the blood transfusion from the Human Torch and became the speedster known as Spitfire. So as we're coming up to this story, the invaders had gone back to the United States. They were called back by the president, and they fought a couple of adventures there. And then the invaders returned back to England and left Bucky and Toro in the United States with their new little team called the Kid Commandos. They had found a couple of other kid superheroes, and they were going to try to fight the war effort in the U.S. against the Nazi spies and all that as the Kid Commandos.
Cool.
Yeah, it was. So they returned to England, reconnected with Spitfire and Union Jack, and one of their first adventures was fighting the Frankenstein monster, or as a Nazi.
Oh gosh.
That was the first 2 issues, and that was pretty cool. So Frank Springer's last issue was issue 29 or issue 28, and Alan Kupperberg started the art chores as of issue 29 with not Frank Springer.
Robbins?
Frank Springer is joining here. Frank Robbins did the original artwork, but Frank Springer used to ink him, so Frank Springer is the inker here. So Robbins was the artist up until issue 28, and then he left. And then Alan Kupperberg started with 29. So Alan Kupperberg is the artist here, and it looks like Kupperberg was trying to maintain the style of Robbins. Not a duplicate of Robbins' artwork, but he kind of kept the same style. So the theme kind of continued on. It wasn't a very big jarring artwork. It wasn't like going to Carmine Infantino or Steve Ditko art, which is very different than other people. So it wasn't a drastic change. It was a nice little more change. So the issues we're going to cover is 32 and 33. Cover dated September and October of 78. They were on sale in June and July of 78 with a whopping cover price of 35 cents each. So why did you pick these?
Well, the funny thing is going through a quarter bin, or someplace at Comic-Con, I've been flipping through here, and prominent on 32 is the character Thor, and also Hitler. And I've called it up in front of me. 32 has Hitler cheering or pronouncing, "You're too late, invaders. You must now face the wrath of the Third Reich's ultimate warrior, Thor, the god of thunder." And in the background, you see the various members of the invaders breaking through a brick wall. But front and center, you've got Thor, who looks really pissed and aggressive, facing the reader. And it's dawned on me, wait a minute, how can they do this? Thor very clearly has a warrior's code and a morality about him. But on the other hand, I was aware that Hitler apparently had a fascination for the old myths and the legends, and that's the basis for the Raiders of the Lost Ark story, that he was a nut about mythology and mysticism. Mm-hmm. And there truly was a quest for all sorts of things that might be mystical or supposedly of interest or to help the Nazi cause. That's based in reality. So the concept that he might want or co-opt Thor to be the champion of the Aryan race has a certain sense of a ring of truth. It's like, yeah, that sort of makes sense. So I was drawn. I wanted to see, how did this happen? Obviously, Thor only sticks around for, I thought, one issue. It turns out to be a 2-issue story. But, I'm really intrigued. That was enough to draw me in, to make me want to see this issue. The Back to the Bins guys talk about, does it have cover appeal? Does it make you want to pick it up and read it? Yeah, that's exactly what this one did. It's like, how does this come about? How representative is this cover of what goes on inside? So that's my interest.
It's cool, and it's a Kirby cover, so
that helps.
That's a great cover as it is, and inked by Joe Sinnott, who was pretty much known for his inks over on Fantastic Four.
I see the KS underneath Hitler's heel there. Now that you mention it, it's like, yeah, that is also why it appealed to me. It rang those bells from my childhood when I was collecting the Fantastic Four, and Kirby Sinnott was the Fantastic Four for me. So that's another reason why this makes sense.
So the basic synopsis of this is the invaders are just coming off their battle with Frankenstein, and there's a thing in there about some new types of tanks that were going to be introduced, to some special tanks that were going to be able to be like the tanks of all tanks. Hitler is at like a performance of the Ring Cycle by Wagner, and he's all fascinated by it, like you said, and Hitler was definitely fascinated by Norse mythology. So he's just like, pondering, wow, this would be cool. I like Thor. Thor's awesome. And then somehow some of his scientists found some kind of interdimensional a way to view into other dimensions. So they kind of scoped in on Asgard and seeing Thor battling giants and trolls and all that kind of stuff, and Hitler saying, yeah, I like this guy. How can we get him? It'd be great if he was on our side. We would be unstoppable then. So somehow they figured out a way to pull him out of that realm of Asgard into Berlin, and through a series of convincing Thor, because this wasn't the Thor that we knew. This was mythology Thor. It is the Thor we knew, but it was before he came to America, or it came to the way that we know him. So they snapped him out of time and out of place, And basically, Hitler convinces Thor that they are being oppressed by these other folks, and that so it was able to convince him without giving them all the details exactly why they were being oppressed and being put on and trying to battle. So it appealed to his warrior sense and his sense of justice of how to defend people. So that's how he got him on there on his side. And then the main goal was to kidnap and kill Joseph Stalin. They go through the first issue, and the next thing you know, the invaders are showing up at a train where Stalin is, and they're trying to going to kind of escort him. And then, boom! At the end of the episode or series issue, there's Thor calling the invaders villains, and it's going to take out the enemy of the people, Joseph Stalin. That's the end of the first issue. Do you want to talk about that, or go on to the second?
Only to comment that there's a shadowy assistant to the scientist with a bandaged face. And this becomes significant. Anytime you have somebody with their face hidden in a comic book, clearly that's going to be a surprise or a reveal. You can note prize and look at how they open the interdimensional portal. Once we reveal who that person is, it makes a little bit more sense. But it's very comic book plot. It happens because it has to happen because of to advance the plot. But that's probably enough. When we do the big reveal, I think it's in the next issue. So let's keep going on with 33.
So 33 has, and I'm sure you probably would love this too. It's a battle with Thor and Submariner right on the cover, and you really enjoy the character Submariner. So this must have really tweaked your interest. And again, It's a Kirby cover, but it's inked by Dave Cockrum this time. So another great pairing, in my opinion, and a really impressive cover. What did you think of the cover?
I've got it in front of me. For some reason, I hadn't seen this one until I'm looking at it online. I was not aware of this one, but yeah, I can see the Kirby in it. Great figure work, nice composition. I like this. Harkens back to Avengers number 71. I like the blue background and the Human Torch flying up and over in front of that blue sky. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of that same cover, although it's not. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they continue on. Of course, they battle Thor, and eventually Thor brings down Rain, and it's a big battle. So Mariner escapes with Joseph Stalin to protect him, and then Thor flies off, and then the invaders, of course, try to figure out what's going on. We get a scene with Hitler, of course. Hitler's like all pissed off at Thor because Thor failed. Dummkopf. Yeah. It's so funny the way that they portray the character of Hitler in this. It's great. And then the doctor, that's the scientist that's helping, that's creating all this with the assistance of this bandaged negative man looking assistant, he's having second thoughts. He's like, man, this is wrong. I can't do this. He tries to back out of it, but Hitler's like, no, you're going to do this or you're dead. Well, the guy dies of a heart attack anyway. And then
so conflicted.
More than likely all the stress and everything. So the assistant's like, nope, you are batshit crazy, and you're going to interfere with my plans for what I want to do. So I'm going to sabotage you. So he kind of opens up a communication, flips on the microphone that is somehow linked to Thor's hammer. And while Hitler is on one of his little tirades about how he's going to conquer the world and how he duped this stupid god of thunder into helping him, Thor hears all this and realizes, oh my gosh, I've been tricked into this. So he converts to his sense of justice, of course, and his wanting the fight for the right thing. He goes and joins the invaders, or he stops fighting them. And then we switch to Hitler and the shadowy figure, and Hitler's like, bring in the trolls, bring in everything, this is how we're going to win the war. And assistant's like, no way, he sabotages everything. And then you want to do the reveal, Kirk? Reveals himself as?
He sabotages the operation, it explodes, and in the wreckage, Hitler survives and says, why would you do this? How can you do this? And the assistant shows his true colors. Earlier, he'd had a line saying, well, I'm no doctor, and so he says, Nazi dog, just be glad I didn't kill you myself. You know, I agreed to help Dr. Olson only because for some time I've been trying to contact my dead mother in the spirit world. My mother, incidentally, was born gypsy, as I was. So you've got all the elements here that Thomas has set up and sprinkled in here for you. That obviously this person is a scientist. They can open up time portals. They have a bandaged face. Their mother was a gypsy. Did I say that already? And doesn't have any great love for the Nazis. So clearly this is Victor Von Doom. However, where it fits in Von Doom's timeline, character development, is of question. Some people think that this falls between the time that he was kicked out of college after the explosion that scarred his face and before he made it to the Himalayas. Other people say, no, he's got a time machine. That's how he's opening up the portal. So this has to be Doom simply without his armor. Well, it's a conundrum, and one that we're not going to solve today. But this is supposed to be clearly Victor Von Doom, who's first helped and then sabotaged Hitler. So, and then he vanishes. He walks off stage, and he's never identified by name that I recall that I can see.
Yeah. So that was a what? Oh my gosh, how cool! Because back then, getting these little tidbits of bits and pieces from the past of our characters was always kind of cool. So this little bit of a backstory, and Roy Thomas was king at doing this kind of stuff in this series and All-Star Squadron. So it was really great to pull this in. It probably was a little out of sync with
the FF chronology.
With FF chronology, because this would make Doom probably 30 years old or so in 1943, 42, 43-ish, or even if he was 25, it would still be, by the time 1963 rolled around when the FF hit and Doom was their number one winner, he would have been like in his 50s by then. So it's a little off, but we didn't care back then. Sliding time scale, it was just a cool reveal. The book rounds off with Thor saying, "Oh yeah, I'm really sorry. Union Jack had disguised himself as Stalin to act as a decoy with one of those very cool Mission Impossible masks that no one can tell the difference once it's on. He got zapped by Thor's lightning to kill him, and so he was laying there dying, and Thor felt so bad that he pulled the mystic lightning out and restored Brian's visage back to life, and then as a result, Union Jack ends up with a electric bolt power.
Terrific. So he's got a new power as a result of this.
Yep. And that ends. And then the next issue is continuing on with a plot thread from way back in the teens.
The Mighty Destroyer?
Yeah, the Destroyer. Not necessarily a plot thread, but it picks up a character that we had seen over in earlier issues, so which was pretty cool. And that's it.
For a little 2-issue arc here, that's pretty cool. I've got to tell you, the art doesn't do anything for me. This is one of the reasons why I didn't embrace this series, didn't care for it. I don't want to dump on it too badly, but hey, Kirby and Sinnott is where I live and burn. Springer and Robbins, or Copperbang, I don't know what the mix was, but I didn't do anything for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see in sort of a stylized, war effort poster, very simplistic stories. Okay, I can see that appeal, but man, anytime I've seen any of those artists show up in Cap or anything else, it's like, put it back on the rack. It's just, it ain't my cup of tea. So.
Yeah, I know it's very stylized, and it really is true, or it really seems like people either like Frank Robbins or they hate him.
Yep.
And there's very few. I haven't even seen anyone in any of the groups say, yeah, it's okay. I don't care one way or the other. It's either been very much hate, or love. And I'm in the. I really like his artwork, and in this series, I think it works really well. And I picked up the Essentials, the black and white Captain America ones, and was looking at his artwork there, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So I like his artwork well enough.
It's interesting. Look at the last page, the last panel in this second issue. In other words, it's the last panel in issue 33. We have Cap on the left with a Russian flag behind him, and in the bottom right we have Namor. And look at those ears. Flat top head, yes, but the ears are not just pointed. They're flared.
They're exaggerated,
to my eye, I mean, that doesn't fit with any of the depictions earlier in the book, as far as I'm concerned. But, okay. They say, whatever you're reading when you're turned 10, 11, 12, right in that sweet spot where kids are drawn to comics, that's the style of art that you will always value. Those are the artists that always lives in your memory as the golden age, the high point of your comics reading experience. And I have to admit, I think that's true for me too, because, I came into Kirby and Sinnott on the Fantastic Four, and that's part of my childhood. You were reading The Invaders, and that's your childhood, and that's what appeals to you. Other people, it was when Byrne was on the X-Men. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. I really do. It doesn't make any difference what the artwork looked like. It's what was there, what you were reading at that time in your life.
I agree with you. I think that era of when comics were very important to you, creativity and the way you can escape into reading something fun and dynamic and
lose yourself in it.
Lose yourself, whether it was scientifically possible or correct, didn't matter.
Right. Just had to follow the storyline. It had to make some sort of internal logic, consistent sense, so you weren't pulled out of the story and go, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So
the only people who say that's all right, that would be Andrew Leyland. That's all he ever seems to say. It's all right.
But yeah, so it was fun to revisit these. Thanks for bringing it on. Kupperberg, I think, is a good composer. I mean, he is a good storyteller in the way that he composed the panels and drew the story through, I think. What did you think of just not necessarily his artwork style, but his composition of story?
Well, I noticed in a couple of spots when you were talking about Hitler on a rant, I was flipping through the pages, and there's one scene where he's standing in front of the newsreel footage trying to convince Thor, and I thought that's an interesting layout, because you've got the black and white images of the invaders behind him, and he's got his arms raised, and then Thor's in full color in front of him, and I thought there's something here. There's a layout and a thought and an intent about how this has been positioned that works for me. So I think I'm not sure that it required two issues to tell, although we don't have a one-issue version, so I don't know if it would fit if it was all packed into one. But, it was a way to get Thor there. It was a way to get Thor co-opted and then straighten him out and have him depart. It was a way to give Union Jack an additional power, because he was lamenting that he didn't bring anything to the table. Apparently that was this ongoing subplot. It hits all the marks that it's supposed to, that it needed to have a nice, self-contained World War II story. So, I don't know about incorporating so many historical figures like Hitler and Stalin. That gets a little bit trite for me, but nonetheless, it's good. One of the reasons why I say this is just yesterday I was looking on the History Channel, and there was a series called The World Wars, and they're up to the point where Hitler and Stalin have made a pact to divide Poland. And then later on, Hitler's going to open up the Second Front and attack the Soviet Union, which most historians, I believe, say that was his major blunder. That was stupid and never should have happened, and he knew better, but he did it anyway. So they point to Hitler's mindset and ego and the fact that maybe he was losing grasp on reality. Anyway, so I just saw that yesterday, and so this was very fresh in my mind. So to see Stalin be the victim and then be rescued by the invaders, it's a complicated real-world history where at one point he's an ally and then he becomes our opponent. So, I'm okay with it. It's a comic book story. So it's all right.
Yeah, I know you seemed a little disappointed after you first read it. I think you had higher expectations for the story, didn't you, based just looking at the cover and thinking, oh, wow. But it didn't seem like it let you down too much.
No, I'm not sure that I would have liked it when it came out, but, as an artifact, I appreciate it, and I enjoyed looking at it. And that's about as far as I want to take it. I'm not looking for a mint copy of it. I'm not going to have it framed. What was I going to say? There was something that was just on the tip of my tongue. Oh, yes, the Thor that's presented is the Thor of mythology. It's before he has the morality and the hubris of Don Blake added.
Mhm.
So he is more violent. He is more aggressive. He is more black and white, right or wrong. You don't have thought balloons for him, so you can't get into his internal thought process. He's more a force of nature, so to speak.
Mhm.
No pun intended. So, he sure looks like our Silver Age Thor, but he acts more like a Golden Age Thor. So it works for me. The story's internal logic works. I just think there maybe should have been more made out of the Doctor Doom shadowy figure element, although I guess it was Thomas's intent to bury that as an Easter egg for those that wanted something else or wanted it tied into Marvel Silver Age a little bit more.
Mhm.
I mean, I no prize the explanation of how did they open the dimensional portal into, well, that's Doctor Doom
Yeah.
and his time machine. That's what this is. At least
And
that's how I explain it. And that's how he may have gotten here, jumping time periods to come to this point. I don't know. It's never dealt with. I'm making
you
it all
know,
up.
that's a good point. Maybe he jumped back in time to try to help develop the technology with this particular scientist to
Mm-hmm.
find out some trick, because a lot of times a lot of people have different pieces, and when you start getting the pieces from this person, this person, you can complete the thing. So yeah, he might have just jumped back in time, and maybe this was the Doom that we know, and he just bandaged himself up. He's not in his armor because that would be too obvious.
If his if his
That's an interesting twist there.
if his goal was to talk to or rescue his mother, who's trapped in the nether world or the other world, that's
Hmm.
great motivation. And that would explain why he would want to consult with that scientist, that Nazi scientist, about how
Hmm.
do we do this? How can that be done? But when that guy dies, when that other scientist croaks, his reason for being there, his interest is over.
It's
Like a
done.
switch has been thrown.
Yep.
So I can see that plot and that motivation. And then he sabotages Hitler in more than one way. The invaders never know of his role or his help at all. See that get revisited or touched on at some point in some future story.
Yeah, I like the last panel we see of Doom. It's a very small one there, and he's just walking away while the soldiers are running to the lab. He's just calmly walking away. That's a
Yeah.
it's a really interesting panel there. That's cool.
Yeah, striding off, stage left, not to be seen again.
And like you said, I'm glad we talked about this, because that's an interesting thing that I hadn't thought before. I just kind of thought, oh, this was just saying that this was really in Doom's chronology of life, that this is where he was. But no, maybe he actually went back from the future.
I don't know where I got this from. Maybe it was a review of this issue. I can't recall. It's not my original thought. Somebody else, maybe it was in the letters pages about 3 issues forward, which would be about the time that they would print the fan feedback for this. I can't remember where it came from, but it's not my original thought.
That's cool.
I think initially, though, it was intended to be Doom between the college accident and adopting his armor. I think that's where Thomas had intended to position it. But, fans second guessing the author, trying to no prize away conundrums.
And good stuff. Well, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, that's all I've got for this episode. Do you have anything else to add, or shall we wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up. Nothing more to add, really. Just enjoyable.
Okay.
Next time.
Yeah. Who knows what will be next time? In fact, we're not even sure when this is going to air. But thanks for coming along with us. If you enjoy The Invaders, we'd like to know about it. If you have additional thoughts on how this story is structured or the characters, we'd love to hear from you. Always, you can write to us and any of the Third Degree Burn folks by going to gottagetburned@gmail.com or go on to Facebook and look for the Third Degree Burn page. Is there one for Cocktails and Comics?
No, it's all going through Third Degree Burn page.
Okay, so by all means, drop us a line if you have a nomination for something else you'd like us to review. I don't know what we're going to call this feature, Silver Age Memories. I have no idea. We haven't even talked about doing anything on an ongoing basis, but this was just a lot of fun. We had it down downtime here in the recording schedule, so we just wanted to strike while the interest was there. So that's all I've got. I want to thank John Hyatt for coming along and giving all that great background on the invaders. I really appreciate it, because I didn't know that stuff. And I'm Kirk Greenfield.
And I'm John Hyatt. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for bringing this up, Kirk. A lot of fun.
Don't mention the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it all right. So, it's all forgotten now, and let's hear no more about it. So that's 2 egg mayonnaise, a prawn Goebbels, a Hermann Goring, and 4 colded salads. No, wait a moment, I got a bit confused here. Sorry, I got a bit confused because everyone keeps mentioning the war. So could you... What's the matter?
It's all right.
Is there something wrong?
Will you stop talking about the war?
Me? You started it?
We did not start it.
Yes, you did. You invaded Poland.
Thanks for listening. You can find us and many other great shows at twotruefreaks.com. That's twotruefreaks.com. Third Degree Burn is spelled with the number 3, RDDEGREE, and is part of the Two True Freaks network of shows. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just look for Third Degree Burn, spelled with the number 3, and Burn spelled BYRNE. Compliments, complaints, and recipes can be sent to gottagetburned@gmail.com. That's GOTTAGETBYRNED@gmail.com. Drop us a line and tell us how we're doing. Till next time, this has been Third Degree Burn.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.